Okay, we'll be getting started in just a minute. Welcome to the Bearded Weatherman. Go ahead and leave a comment. Let me know where you're watching from tonight. Let's get an idea of where everybody's at so that we can get the information you need in those areas and like and share this with friends. Let's get this information out to the people who need it the most. That are in the path of these storms. So go ahead and like and share. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe. Share with friends. We'll get started here in just a minute. We're waiting for some people to join in so they don't miss anything. It's good to see everybody. I'm the Bearded Weatherman. We will get started very soon. We're going to wait for a few people to join in. Sorry, I was a little late starting the stream. Had a few technical issues. It happens. Okay, we're going to get started very shortly here. Levi checking in tonight. Good to see Levi. They're down in there in southern Georgia watching this storm closely. All right. Let's bring the music down a little bit here and let's go ahead and get started for tonight. So how's everybody doing out there? As always, I'm the Bearded Weatherman. Usually this time of year we got a few folks that are new to the page. So I do like to go ahead and introduce myself and my background. I'm a Navy veteran. I worked for the Naval Maritime Forecast Center in Norfolk, Virginia. We were responsible for routing ship traffic and naval assets at sea around these kinds of storms that we're going to talk about tonight. Also, we forecasted for bases all over the Western Hemisphere, from Texas, Corpus Christi, NAS Corpus Christi, over to Norfolk, over to Rota, Spain, into the Mediterranean. We routed ships around weather, any kind of inclement weather, high winds and seas. So that was part of my responsibilities. So part of our responsibilities were to monitor the tropics, and so we had to be proficient in tropical meteorology, forecasting these types of events. So that's my background. Currently, I work for an airline here in Salt Lake City. I'm originally from the state of Florida. So again, I like to introduce myself. I know around this time of year when there's a lot of light on these storms, a lot of interest, obviously a lot of people are watching these storms very closely. You may be new to the page. So again, I just wanted to introduce myself. So currently, as I was saying, I work for an airline. I monitor flights, watch for weather and route them around that. Also do the meteorology briefs and meteorology role there at the airline. So today, for example, early this morning, I was briefing the executive leadership about the impacts from this storm, and so we were planning on moving aircraft out of airports like Tampa, which is probably going to be very affected by this storm. In fact, Tampa International will be closing tonight at midnight. And speaking of that, if you have any news to share, school closures, anything like that, anything very important for your area, please go ahead and share that in the comments so I can go ahead and get that information out. Again, go ahead and like this video. Go ahead and share with friends. We want to get this information to the people who need it the most, and those are the people that will be impacted by these storms. So again, that's enough of an introduction. I know you're all here to see or to check in on the latest for Tropical Storm Idalia. We do not yet have a hurricane. We'll talk about some of the reasons why. But it's good to see everybody. Looks like people are checking in. So let's go ahead and get started for tonight. All right, so here it is. Here's Idalia right here. Right there spinning around in the Northwest Caribbean Sea. You see good organization around the center. You do see some outflow banding. We'll go ahead and zoom in on this storm. Here it is here. Let's go ahead and get the visible up. And you see a deep, vigorous convection, as it's known in meteorology. You see all the popcorn here. That's all thunderstorms that are forming, okay? Right around the core of this storm, all right? Now, as of yet, we don't have any indication of an eye wall. We need to see an eye wall around the center of this storm, kind of wrapping around the center in order to classify it as a hurricane. You also, of course, have the Hurricane Hunter aircraft flying out there, taking measurements. As of yet, as of the 4 p.m. Central Advisory, that's 5 p.m. Eastern, the latest from the National Hurricane Center, we do not have a hurricane yet. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why. But let's go ahead and check in on the latest from the National Hurricane Center. Here's our forecast, okay? As you see here, we have hurricane warnings up for most of western Cuba right now. You see hurricane warnings now in effect for much of the west coast of Florida. Okay, and that, of course, well, with a hurricane warning, what that means is that hurricane conditions are very likely within a 36-hour period. And obviously, you see here, we have Tuesday, Wednesday, 36 hours from now, Wednesday, late Tuesday, or I should say overnight, Tuesday, early morning Wednesday. This storm will be approaching the northwest Florida coast. It is currently forecasted to be a major hurricane at that time. Major hurricane is Category 3 or above. That is winds of 111 miles per hour to 129, I think. So obviously a very powerful storm at that point is forecasted. And so right now you see the forecast cone encompass a pretty large area of south or northwest Florida. The Big Bend area, as it's called. Again, I am a native of Central Florida. I'm a native of the state of Florida, so I'm definitely familiar with some of these areas. Steinhatchee, you got Crystal River over here. Here's Tampa, of course, north of there. So all the way at Apalachicola, you got Panama City Beach over here. So a huge area of the state of Florida right now, the west coast of Florida, under a hurricane warning. So again, hurricane warning, hurricane conditions or hurricane force winds of at least 75 miles per hour are now very likely within 36 hours. So those warnings now up from the National Hurricane Center. Again, you see the cone, right? Pretty large expanse here, and what the cone means is simply anywhere in this cone, this storm could pass directly overhead. So I always say this every year when we get one of these storms. Last year it was Ian. We may see something of that at that level. We'll talk about that in the forecast in a minute, as far as the strength of the storm and what we might expect. But the bottom line is people ask me, what about over here? It looks like one model's saying over here, one model's saying over there. Normally, what we do in meteorology is we take a blend of the models and we kind of average out what they're all saying, and what the average is what the most likely scenario will be for this particular system. So right now, that is right here. I'll go ahead and turn on the track line. That track is currently the most likely scenario. Now, this is a couple of days out still, right? We all know, if you're in the state of Florida watching these storms year after year, that this storm will wobble. Okay, this will not be the exact track in the end. It's very unlikely. Could happen, but very, very unlikely. So, again, bottom line, this storm could, move a little bit further east. That means a little bit more impact for Central Florida. That's the dangerous right front side of the hurricane right here, which has the strongest winds and potential tornado threat. Or it could track over here towards Apalachicola, and then now you have those stronger winds over there. That Big Bend that's up there by Tallahassee. Mexico Beach is there. Obviously hit very hard by Michael. So we hope that's not the case. We kind of hope if the impacts are the landfall will be in a lightly populated area. There are some lightly populated areas in here, but look, it's the state of Florida. People want to live in the state of Florida. It's sunshine. It's great weather, and so it's a state that has a lot of people, and so no matter where it goes, it's gonna create impacts. And unfortunately, not to be morbid, it will kill. A hurricane of this that's forecasted to be this kind of strength. Of course, we'll see in the end, but pretty likely at this point, given some of the conditions, and we'll look at those in a second. But again, these are storms that are deadly. They're very, very powerful and very destructive. So, you know, you may have been through a Cat 1, you may have been through a tropical storm, or even a Cat 2, and you think, you know, that's not much, you know. Especially if you're along the coast, you should really heed the warnings and evacuate if those evacuation orders are issued. This is a whole different beast. Especially, we're going to talk about this in a second when we talk about what the strength of the storm might be. But especially if this storm does make landfall at like a Category 4 level, that's just a whole different beast than a Cat 1. I mean, it's just like not even a comparison, really. So anyway, please heed those warnings, and you know where you're at. You'll know we're gonna look at storm surge in a second, but you know if you're on the coast, you know if you're in a place that's vulnerable, and if you don't, talk to some locals. If you're new to the area, they probably have experience with it. So in any case, all right, let's go ahead and just look at a few of these impacts right now forecasted by the National Hurricane Center. We got a lot to talk about tonight. We're going to get to all of it. You can hang in there as long as you want. Got Terry checking in, saying he's late. He's not late. Terry, you're never late, man. Good to see you. Good Terry, good friend of the Bearded Weatherman. Jillian's in here checking in. She's saying, hey, everybody. She's tagging people. Get in here. Come on. Come on now. Get in there. Donna is asking if you live in Tampa, should they come up to Orlando? Depends on where in Tampa they are, and also depends on the ultimate track. But you do see hurricane warning, hurricane strength winds. I mean, coastal areas are going to be the most vulnerable. So if you know people that are along the coast, and we're going to look at the storm surge map in a second, and they're in a really vulnerable area, they should probably consider, if there is an evacuation order, heeding it. But, you know, we'll talk about that. All right, but I understand your concern there, Donna. Yeah, I don't blame you for being concerned about friends and family. Lewis is checking in, saying here. Good to see you, Lewis. Thank you for the support. Thank you, everybody, for commenting. Again, if you go ahead and leave a comment, even if you're not watching live, if you're watching later, let me know where you're at. I do get to those comments. I do try to answer them in turn. All right, let's look at the most destructive impact first. Okay, let's go in order. And the first, as we all know, the most destructive element of any hurricane, the thing that takes the most lives, is always going to be storm surge. So let's go ahead and start there. Some of these numbers have been bumped up a little bit, especially over here in that Big Bend area. You now see 8 to 12 feet being forecasted. So pretty dangerous storm surge. When you talk about that, you got 4 to 7 feet all in the Tampa Bay region. Okay, so think 7 feet. That's taller than me. That's taller than an average adult male. That's going to inundate you, especially if you're on a low-lying area, and you're going to be very vulnerable to storm surge. So, yeah, if you're in an evacuation zone, low-lying area, flood-prone area, definitely consider you looking at that very carefully. Then we've got 6 to 9 feet up here, all the way up to about the Crystal River area, Homosassa, some of these areas. So 6 to 9 feet. Again, 9 feet. That's almost the height of a average house, right? Of a normal house, single-story house, about 10 feet. So think about that. Now your water is all the way over your house, up to your ceiling. So there's no escaping at that point if the water starts to come up. And then, of course, 8 to 12 feet. This is forecast based on a Category 3 major hurricane. Again, this could increase. With your Category 4 hurricanes, you can see as much as 18 feet of storm surge. Category 5's up to 30. I saw that with Katrina. It knocked down bridges. It was incredibly destructive. And these areas here, pretty low-lying, pretty marshy areas, lots of estuaries and inlets. I know my dad lived over in Homosassa at one point. We used to go hang out there. Pretty cool area. he was on stilts, but you know, if a big hurricane was moving around out there in the Gulf, it would push that water way up in there, up the river. He was probably a half a mile away from the river, and that water would be right there at his patio, you know, right there at his deck level. So, and that was only like 6 feet of surge, or only, but you know what I mean. But this number could potentially increase, especially if we do end up getting something like a Category 4. And we're going to talk about that in a second. That is definitely a possibility. 12 feet. That's over the house now. We're over the roof, okay? Or we're in the attic at least. And this, again, very, very, very dangerous part of the, very vulnerable part of the state of Florida and the Gulf Coast for this type of storm surge. So, you even see 2 to 4 feet, 3 to 5 feet down to Inglewood, Charlotte Harbor, Fort Myers, 2 to 4 feet. So, that's up there in the yard. So that again, storm surge, definitely by far the most hazardous element. You even see 2 to 4 feet over here on the southeastern coast, the Carolinas, or South Carolina and Georgia. 2 to 4 feet expected. We'll look at that in a minute. But again, here is the storm surge forecast, the latest from the National Hurricane Center as of 5 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you got any questions. Mike from Mike's weather page coming to storm chase. I don't know. I couldn't tell you that, but wouldn't surprise me. I know there's a lot of folks in the chasing community ready to go out and safely get that video and pictures we all like to look at. I know Adam Lucio, my buddy Adam, storm chaser Adam Lucio. He was loading up the car, loading up the SUV to come down to check it out. So we'll be looking for that coverage too. I'm sure he'll check in at some point, as he has been over the last couple of days. All right, that's your storm surge forecast. Let's go ahead and let's zoom in a little bit more. Okay. So now we've got a general idea. Now let's look at some areas here. Now this is an estimate. This is based on models. Don't take this as true, absolute fact for numbers, but you can already see reds up here. Okay, that's going to tell you something, right? Yellow's down here. So yellow's caution, right? Let's go ahead and zoom in on Tampa Bay. Now let's look over here on the outer, the coast side here. Of Tampa, St. Pete, right? The peninsula. Let's kind of zoom in. Let's look for somewhere we all kind of know. Clearwater, right? That's really famous beach there. Look at the oranges in there. Oranges. So greater than 6 feet above ground expected of storm surge there. Yellow is greater than 3 feet. So in other words, you look at the entire Barrier Island here, right? That means the entire Barrier Island will be in 3 feet of water. So if you're going to go over there thinking you're going to have some fun, well, you better be prepared, especially because there's going to be some very strong winds pushing that water in, and you can easily, you may think you got a vehicle that can handle it, but it can easily get swamped in that kind of flooding. So heed those evacuation warnings. That's my recommendation. You don't have to take it. It's just I think probably a good idea. Look over here. We've got the Tampa Airport right here, right? Here's the Tampa Airport. That's what we were talking about today at the airline. At the airline I work at, I was doing the weather brief this morning for all the impacts that we're expecting. And Tampa is one of the airports we operate out of. So you do see right here at the back of Tampa Bay, orange is right here, greater than 6 feet above ground. Yellows, right, greater than 3. Right there at the airport. Basically, you got water washing into the runway. Probably not a great place to take off and land, right? So Tampa International will close tonight. Again, as I was saying earlier, if you have any news to share, school closures, beach closures, any government, closures, I don't know, any kind of information like that, please share it in the comments. We'll go ahead and get that information out. I'm sure we're going to get a lot more of that news, those headlines coming soon. People talking about smoking meat in here in the chat, and I'm really just kind of, my mouth is watering, but anyway. Good barbecue. All right, Here's that here, but look, the whole bay, whole Tampa Bay, at least 3 feet of water washing up into the bay. This number can increase. Okay, if we have a strong major hurricane that develops, especially like something really rapid intensification up to Category 3, maybe a little bit earlier than anticipated. This all those winds that are swirling around the eye and around that storm. Look at that, all the south westerly winds flowing around the hurricane, right, counterclockwise around the low, pushing all of that water into those inlets and bays, into Tampa Bay. So very, very vulnerable to flooding there in Tampa Bay. So again, these numbers could increase. Down here at Cape Coral, a little bit better story right now. I mean, greater than 1 foot above ground. You know, a little bit of flooding going on, but certainly not too major. This number can change. You know, this could increase. So we're going to continue to watch the forecast. Currently, we have a tropical storm. We don't have a hurricane yet, so we're waiting on that. Here's Homosassa. Like I said, greater than 9 feet above ground, so that would flood my dad's old house probably. But you can see that water getting pushed up into these inlets and estuaries. All of these inlets and estuaries here, great fishing out here, of course. But 9 feet above ground there in Riviera. Pin's malfunctioning. Homosassa getting 9 feet above ground all along the Homosassa River. Crystal River up here, there's the power plant, 9 feet above ground, even inland here. Look at this, all the way inland, 6 feet above ground. So almost as tall as an average adult male, all the way a couple of miles inland. Look at this. All that water getting pushed by those winds. Like I said, very strong southwesterly winds going to push all that water into those inlets and estuaries, and it's going to flood these areas. Very vulnerable to flooding and storm surge in those areas. So again, that just gives you some kind of feel for what we're talking about here. Some of these areas a little more lightly populated. So again, we hope that the landfall is somewhere in some of these areas. Of course, you got Gainesville right here. Could potentially be right there on the right side of that hurricane, the strongest side traditionally of a hurricane, the hurricane eye wall, the right front quadrant, potentially under very powerful hurricane, Category 2, even maybe 3 hurricane force winds. So I'd expect that University of Florida is going to start closing things down eventually soon, depending on what the ultimate track is. But again, you see all these reds here, greater than 9 feet above ground in this huge area. Huge area forecasted, all from Homosassa up here towards Steinhatchee. Here's Tallahassee. If that track moves in moves a little bit more west, then Tallahassee's under very strong, potentially Category 2 or 3, or even 4 hurricane force winds, depending on what kind of strengthening we see. With our current forecast track, we're going to look at a little more in detail later when we look at timing of the storm. Get Jacksonville under the right side of this storm. So again, storm surge always the most hazardous part of a hurricane. Let's take a look at the next most hazardous element of a hurricane, and that is going to be wind, right? So here's our tropical storm force wind probabilities. Okay, so tropical storm force winds of greater than or equal to 39 miles per hour, right? Up to 74, where we have hurricane force winds. And you see right here, 90% chance now at this point of these areas seeing tropical storm force winds. So strong, sustained winds and gusts up to hurricane force in these areas now very, very likely, 90%. And we haven't seen a whole lot of change in this forecast track. This forecast track has pretty much remained, pretty much stayed the same over the last day or so. So the model's really starting to come into agreement on this storm, and we haven't had much change in that forecast track. We'll look at that in a minute. So again, winds, one of the most dangerous elements of a hurricane, or any tropical system. Here is our hurricane force wind probability. So you see here now we're at that 50, greater than 50% chance of hurricane force winds in this area here in the Big Bend. And so, you know, again, this will increase this percentage depending on the ultimate track. Again, we have this cone that we're looking at, right? Got the cone still, but those numbers will climb. Those percentages will climb soon when we ultimately see what that track will be. Got Julia. I guess what's going on in the comments? People getting a little out of hand here. Julia saying mineral frozen water and tequila plus margarita mix. All right. Well, you know, I got a little bit of my mineral water here. Cheers, everybody. We're not going to panic, right? We're going to stay calm. We're going to hold fast. Stay in the Navy. We're all Floridians. We've dealt... I'm sorry about that. I've got a little foam on the beard. I'm sure that sounds like right there in the mic. Anyway, cheers to you guys out there. Patiently waiting through this broadcast. But again, there's our hurricane force wind probabilities. And then, of course, the next major hazard from a hurricane is going to be rainfall, especially flooding rains. Okay? So you got 6 to 10 inches forecast at this point in some of these areas of the Big Bend right here. 2 to 4, you know, throughout Central Florida. That's not too bad for Central Florida. I mean, you know, you can get almost that in a daily afternoon thunderstorm. So at this point, the forecast is not too bad as far as that, but definitely 6 to 10 inches. You know, that's almost a foot of rain in some of these places. So potentially could see flash flooding, which is that next major hazard. And you see the areas that are going to be most affected by flash floods in this band in here, all the way from the Big Bend up through the southeastern coastline, all the way up even to the Outer Banks here in North Carolina. So very they've got a moderate chance at this point. And if you ever hear a meteorologist say moderate chance of anything, that's a bad thing. There's some pretty good confidence in that. So definitely flooding will be a risk as well with this storm. Okay, look at some key messages. Again, I showed you, as you see here, the National Hurricane Center also wants to highlight their storm surge forecast as the biggest hazard. Also the forecast itself, right? And so you can go in here. This is, again, inundation of 8 to 12 feet above ground expected somewhere between, however you pronounce that, in the Ochilla River. So Florida Gulf Coast, Big Bend, including Tampa Bay, you're under storm surge warning right now. Storm surge conditions expected or very likely within the next 36 hours. All right. So we'll look at Idalia a little bit right now. And you see here good blooms of convection going on. Again, I showed you that earlier. Cold cloud tops. We're waiting to see a little bit of a warming in here in the center, where we can get an eye wall to form around the core of this storm. We don't quite have that yet, but we are expecting that soon. Again, forecasted by tomorrow or even later tonight to be a hurricane, as you see here. So let's look at why that might be. Okay, let's zoom in on this storm. Let's look at the HAPS B. This is a National Weather Service National Hurricane Center model. Really zooms in on the core of that storm. So right now you see it's kind of detached. Like most of the convection and the moisture is kind of detached away from the core. You notice this? See the core here? Don't really have that wrapped around like an eye wall, concentric around the core of the center of the storm. So we don't have that yet as of this forecast hour. Again, that's why we don't have a hurricane. We need to see that eye wall feature first before we can classify it as a hurricane, and that's certainly usually when the hurricane hunters are going to detect those hurricane force winds somewhere within that storm once they fly in there. And you start to notice by later tonight some wrapping going on here. A little bit of wrapping. It's trying to develop an eye wall, right? It's struggling to get there, but it's starting to develop. And now you do start to see that northward motion we've been talking so much about over the last few days, right? I mean, I first posted about this storm on Wednesday of last week, and now here we are Monday, and now we're seeing this storm come to fruition, unfortunately. So as you see here again, still that convection, still most of that, the strength of that storm is separated out from the core of this system. You don't see that wrapping over here as well around the center of the storm. You see the circular center, the pressure center of the storm right here, and those isobars wrapping around the core of the storm. We need to see this convection, these reds and yellows and all this nasty looking stuff right here, consolidated, wrapped around the core of that storm before we can call it a hurricane. So here we are. By the way, I did say isobars, so cheers to Jillian and all of the bearded the bearded dragons out there that have a little drinking game going every time I say isobars. You gotta take a sip. So cheers to everybody. Terry asked about red tide and that effect. Terry, I don't know, man. I mean, I guess if you got all that wind pushing all that storm surge coming, all that wind pushing the waters, the coastal waters there inland, I guess that red tide could be a problem there on the Gulf Coast. I honestly don't know. All right, cool. There we go. So cheers to everybody out there. And again, if you want to support the page, go ahead and send some stars. That's always appreciated. I know some of you definitely are regular star senders or whatever you want to call it. There's a little badge that goes by your name. You can brag to your friends, I guess. I don't know. But that's always very appreciated. I don't do this for any money, but certainly a passion of mine. I'm going to do it no matter what. But if you want to go ahead and send a few stars, that's always appreciated. You can do so. Again, like and share this video with friends. Let's get this information out. If you're on YouTube right now watching, you can go ahead and like and subscribe, share the video. Also, again, I've said this a couple times, and we'll move forward here in a second. On YouTube, if you go over there and you subscribe to the Bearded Weatherman, not only is it a little bit more helpful to me in the sense of certain, there's certain advantages to YouTube. I'll just say that. But also, you can watch it on your TV, right? You can put the app up on your smart TV, and you can watch the Bearded Weatherman. You can actually see these graphics I'm showing. I know on your phone you probably can't see anything. So in any case, you can sit back in the comfort of your couch. My wife's doing it right now, watching on YouTube. She can go ahead and comment right there in the comments if she wants. My beautiful wife Jill and the producer of the show is watching currently over there on YouTube, so she can maybe check in. All right, let's get back to what's important in the weather here. So again, here we go. You start to see, there it is. Start to see that wrapping. See that? By let's see, this is tomorrow morning. Here's 12Z, so that's going to be 8 a.m. on the East Coast, right? You start to see a little bit of wrapping going on here. See it? A little bit, and this is trying to do that, right? It's trying to wrap around and develop an eye wall by tomorrow morning. So again, we may not have a hurricane by tomorrow morning, but start to see this. This is really what we're looking for here. I mean, you really do start to see some of that wrapping going on. Wrapping around the core here. See that wrap around these strong thunderstorms at the core of these tropical systems, really starting to wrap around, forming an eye wall, and that's the classic signature of a hurricane. So again, we're waiting for that, but this model does forecast it for tomorrow afternoon, so that may be around the time frame, maybe a little bit earlier. This is about this is late morning here, 11 a.m. Eastern tomorrow, so starting to see that wrapping going on at that point. So we may have a hurricane by then. I would expect that would be the case. Look at this, someone sent some stars my way. That's very much appreciated. I would imagine that would be Jillian, and it was. Thank you, Jillian, for all your support over the years. You are very much appreciated by the Bearded Weatherman here. And you can see, look at this now by tomorrow night. Look how much this is developed. Look at this clear eye wall here. Strong banding around the core. These very strong cumulonimbus thunderstorm clouds now wrapping around the core. Very fast moving winds. You see all these isobars packed in very tight. And they call this isobaric packing. You also notice, look at the pressure level of this storm. You see that? 955. All right, the lower that number, the deeper the system, so the lower the pressure, of course, the stronger the hurricane, right? The stronger the storm system. And so look at this. Let's just go back a little bit. 972 here overnight tonight. And then by the next late night, 945. So that's a difference of 40 millibars almost, right? In 24 hours. That, folks, is the definition of rapid intensification. And so 945 hurricane, that's a category 3 easily. And we're starting to even approach that category 4 at those numbers. So it's at this point, these hurricane models do predict landfall as a category 3, a strong category 3 hurricane. But again, we may see this develop even further and become a category 4. It's very possible because you see that rapid intensification, right? Let's see that. Give you that range here. So yeah, Cat 3 940 or 964 to 945, and then extreme Cat 4 944 and below. So we're right there. Look at that, 945, 944. So this even could potentially be a Cat 4 if this model's correct by landfall. So there you go, right? These hurricane models really aggressive, really optimistic, or high on this storm, I should say. Not optimistic. It's not very optimistic to have a Cat 4. And, because the American modeling has taken that more leftward bent, okay, versus the Euro, which is a little bit further right, this storm currently, again, there's going to be wobbles. Don't take this with a grain of salt. But this potentially could be a Category 4 hurricane making landfall just south of Tallahassee and passing right over Tallahassee as a Category 4. Now that has not happened in a very long time, to my understanding. So that's pretty incredible if that does occur. I don't know where Michael was in relation to this. I think it was a little bit further west, if I'm not mistaken. Some of you folks might know this a little better than I that are up in the Panhandle. I'm more of a down there from Central Florida, but yeah, I mean, if that GFS holds true, and we'll look at the GFS in a minute. It is very possible that a Category 4 major hurricane may pass right over the city of Tallahassee. That would be pretty incredible. The capital of the state of Florida being impacted by a Category 4. So, but we'll see. This, again, we want to take this with a grain of salt. Let's speaking of that, let's look at the latest Euro now. Let's look at the Euro. Let's back up here. Let's get back. Actually, let's forget that. Let's zoom in to the state of Florida here. So let's get some idea of time frames here, and let's look at how the two main models compare. I could show you the spaghettis, but look, the spaghettis guys are just this cone right here. The spaghettis are going to show you this. That's the cone. It's the uncertainty, right? See, we could look at spaghettis, but at this point, you see basically where they're honing in on. I mean, that's the areas they're basically saying, hey, this is probably going to pass over somewhere here. So I don't really need to do that, I don't think. You've probably seen the spaghettis a million times already. So anyway, here's Florida. Here's 2 p.m. this afternoon, so current time frame. Let's move forward in time. Actually, let's go ahead and get our winds up. So let's get a sense of what's going on with that. Here is Idalia. Now a hurricane, definitely. You see that? Well, no, I'm sorry. More here, maybe. Euro. These global models not the greatest with strength. Okay, with intensity. These you got to take this with a grain of salt. So you may want to look more at now down to 971. So it definitely forecast a hurricane, but you notice it's definitely further to the right than that GFS, which I'll show you now. Oh, I went too far. Oh, okay. Yeah, see, GFS definitely picking up on a potential major hurricane there, 953. That's a Category 3. So further west, see that? Further towards Tallahassee, even. So the GFS is the one saying further west. And let's go back and just look at the timing. I'm sorry, I'm kind of rushing through that. You don't really see it. There's your hurricane. There's very strong winds. So the ECMWF Euro, which you know, guys, I kind of favor. In fact, it was the first model to pick up on this storm a few days ahead of the GFS. And it was the first model to predict this sort of track, like toward the Big Bend. The GFS threw it out towards the west, towards Pensacola at one point. So, again, you guys know my proclivity for that particular model. It's just based on experience, based on my experience as far as the accuracy. And if you've watched the page for a while, you know that that's the case. But in any case, we're not here to debate that. But you see here that the Euro does bring this hurricane kind of hugging the coast here. Now, if this storm has truly intensified up to that major hurricane status by this point on, this is overnight tomorrow night. Here's 2 a.m. Eastern time, so that you don't have to sit there and decode Zulu. And I like that for this. That's why I show this particular model, because you can see the local time. But in any case, you do see possibly a major hurricane right off the coast of west central Florida, pushing all of this storm surge, all this water into Tampa Bay. And so again, if that's the case, those values I showed you on that storm surge map are going to climb. They're going to increase. So that's definitely a possibility right now. But you see the Euro is kind of more of a coast hugger, more a little bit closer to the coast. That would put those stronger winds right over top of, well, potentially strong winds. If it's that far off the coast, you're not really going to get those strong hurricane force winds, but you certainly will get strong winds nonetheless. And this, again, the storm surge is going to definitely be the major hazard at this point. But again, the coast hugger bringing a lot of storm surge in here. So National Hurricane Center has already mentioned that this storm and the threat from this storm is definitely going to be mainly storm surge, especially because of the vulnerability. Again, we talked about it earlier of the Big Bend up here and these low-lying areas, coastal plains, estuaries, tidal flats. A lot of that area is just very vulnerable to storm surge. So again, that's from the National Hurricane Center. So here we go. This is 2 a.m. Wednesday off the coast of west central Florida, Tampa. Now here we are, 5 a.m. Wednesday, and then approaching land. If we are to believe the National Hurricane Center forecast and the hurricane modeling, the intensity modeling, then we will potentially have a strong Category 3 or even Category 4 hurricane now approaching landfall by Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. and then onshore making landfall by late morning on Wednesday, August 30th. And then, if this storm is stronger, this is showing just like a minimal Category 1 hurricane. And again, I tell you, global models don't, especially the Euro is not that great at handling intensity, especially great at track, but maybe not the best always at intensity. But in any case, you may see strong Category 2 winds right on top of Jacksonville for, let's see, that's 11 a.m., 2 p.m., 5 p.m., 8 p.m. So basically up through from the morning hours until sunset or later, potentially hurricane force winds or tropical storm force winds, sustained tropical storm force winds and hurricane force winds over top of the city of Jacksonville for a number of hours. So that is definitely a possibility. So you see landfall around, if the Euro is correct, and usually it's pretty accurate, around Wednesday late morning. Okay, now now ashore, moving over land, is going to start to weaken very quickly as it encounters land. These tropical systems need warm ocean water to thrive and survive and to strengthen. So once they impact land, they start to weaken immediately. So you notice now at the 981 millibars, and then I can't see up there, but you see the storm still 5 p.m. later in the day over Jacksonville. Let's see. Got some really pretty gusty winds. Again, if this is only showing you a minimal Category 1 hurricane, if we have a Category 4, this wind field, the tropical storm force winds are going to extend out further from the center. So that shows you that potentially some parts of Central Florida may even be, I think that's I got a little carried away, but let's say right around there. So some parts of Central Florida could potentially be affected by tropical storm force winds. Again, if this does make landfall as a strong major hurricane, Category 4 potentially. When does it say we pick up forward speed at 8 miles per hour? That timing will be off. Well, it's going to start to pick up speed when it encounters this trough that's going to lift it out. So let me get, there's my satellite. So basically what's moving, going to ultimately move this storm. By the way, I want you to notice that is a strong hurricane, Franklin. No threat to land, but see that eye? That's a beautiful, probably Category 5 hurricane at this point. Not to get off track for just a second. 150 miles an hour, so strong Category 4. You need 155 and above, or 156 and above to be Cat 5. But look, that's a very powerful hurricane. I don't care. You can see it very clearly, that eye. Sorry, it's just as a meteorologist and a weather geek. That's a beautiful storm. Stadium effect eye. Strong, banding, or you see that concentric. That's this eye wall here. Look how big that eye wall is. Very strong. There's your eye feature. Very powerful storm. So look, we may see something like that approaching the coast of Florida in the next couple of days if this storm does indeed intensify to a great extent and undergo that rapid intensification that is forecasted at this point. But in any case, so we're showing you why this storm would eventually pick up speed. So right now it's just kind of spinning along. It's kind of trapped down there by a ridge over the Bahamas over here. It's kind of stuck. But this trough is moving in, and it's kind of going to lift this storm out. And once this storm does encounter the long wave trough that you see it, well, I'm too far left. Once this trough digs down and encounters this storm, it will lift it out and rapidly move it off towards the northeast. This is called the long wave trough, or the jet stream will pick up the storm and move it off. So look, for now it's going to kind of move kind of slowly. What's the, I guess 8 miles per hour is what you're saying is the forward speed right now? Yeah. It will start to pick up speed a little bit as it is lifted up by that trough to the northwest. Let me see, let me get that on the models here. There it is. Okay. So right now, sort of trapped down beneath this ridging in here, but soon this trough is starting to affect it already. It's going to lift it up, lift it off towards the northeast, and then as it encounters that trough, it'll start to pick up a little bit of forward momentum. So that's the answer to your question. Once it starts to encounter this trough up here, it will then pick up speed. And then as this big deep amplitude trough digs in and moves further to the east, which we can see in the forecast. Actually, I'm sorry, it's way in the future. Okay, here we go. So you see, here we go. This is current. You see the trough that is starting to lift this storm to the north. It's already starting to happen. See if we can see that on satellite here. No, okay. Let me get back to. Yeah, you can already see it starting to lift towards the north, right? It's been kind of trapped down here, just stalled out under a ridge that had been built up over the Bahamas, which is right here. See, this is the ridge, okay? And then now this trough's digging in now. See it? And it will lift this system up, and so the closer it gets to this trough, the faster momentum it will pick up. Not too much. And then this big long wave trough up here, will start to dig in and lift this system even further now towards the northeast, and then further faster and faster as it encounters the jet stream, and it's just, sees that trough digging in. Right there, long wave trough. Oops, sorry. I don't need to see soundings. Anyway, that's sort of the upper level steering pattern right now. Is you had a ridge in place, it's right here, that was holding this storm kind of dammed in here in the Caribbean, and then this trough moved in to start to lift this system up to the north. Troughs are weaknesses in the upper level wind pattern, upper level features, and associated with low pressure. So lows don't go into highs, highs go into lows. It's like a block for the storm. That's why that ridge was blocking it. They're called blocking highs a lot of times. And then once this trough dug in, it's starting to lift this storm up, and that's ultimately what's going to lift it off to the north. And then eventually, as this big long wave trough moves in, it will lift it off to the north, east even more. See, there's the storm, there it is low. And there's that big deep amplitude trough, see it? Huge deep amplitude trough digging into the eastern U.S. Now picking up Idalia, moving it now towards the northeast. Ultimately getting stalled out again over the water as you see that trough above it sort of flattens out. You don't really see that U feature which would dig it out. Now it's sort of stuck here, meandering around maybe this high out here, this upper level high. So this will potentially stall out offshore, kind of meander around, and then eventually get picked up. Most likely scenario would be that this would not further threaten the U.S. after it does move offshore. You do see this deep amplitude trough here moving in, and that's going to definitely pick it up again and move it out again. So that's the upper level steering pattern for the next couple of days with Idalia. All right. Yeah, so again, Juliet, you're doing math, but you're doing math at the present speed. Once the trough digs in, it's going to lift it up, lift it off, and that forward momentum will increase. So it will, that's why the models forecast it to have the timing it does, because they're accounting for that increased forward momentum once the trough digs in. But I mean, good question, and it's a good point you're making. I don't know, Jillian, if that thing's hitting Bermuda yet. I don't know. All right, where are we at? Yeah, so let's look at the GFS, the American model. And again, you see that further west here, this is the latest run. Oh, we're starting to get some new data in here. We're getting ECMWF is updating too, so you guys are going to get live updating models here too. Here it is. And let's see. Definitely pushing water in. Also forecasted to bring that storm surge into Tampa Bay from this hurricane a little bit further offshore than what the ECMWF, the Euro, is saying. This is again that late night Tuesday, tomorrow night time frame. And then by Wednesday morning, because it's projected, the GFS is projecting it to stay further west, it's going to be out over water a little longer. So Whereas the Euro is saying landfall around Wednesday morning. The GFS is saying, well, it's going to be a little bit later than that for landfall. But not much. I mean, you see here 11 a.m. This is, I think, on the Euro we had it just slightly onshore. Here this is more to the west, so there's a little bit more time over water, so it's going to take longer to get land. As a hurricane, definitely, at this point. And then by Wednesday afternoon, moving into the southeastern U.S., a little bit further in, definitely further inland from what the Euro is saying. Let's see what the latest Euro says. I haven't looked at that yet. It's still updating, so this is live updating model data. Sorry, I'm clicking a lot here. Tuesday, 8 p.m. Wednesday, 2 a.m. Kind of consistent. Both models pretty much have this storm offshore around the same location by overnight tomorrow night, early morning Wednesday. So good agreement, good consistency in both global models as far as the track forecast. And then, well, we don't have that update, so we're not sure yet whether or not it's going to move it further north or go this way. Let's see if the upper level features will tell us something on that. Zoom out on that. Again, it's live updating. We should get the next time frame here soon. Let's get the upper level. I wonder if does Tropical Tidbits have it? Nope, not yet. Hasn't updated yet. This Pivotal Weather is a pretty great resource. Live updating models, and definitely a good resource. There we go. So there's your latest. But then let's see if we got the upper level. We'll go 500. Okay, yeah. Okay, so the ECWF, now the Euro has moved this storm a little west, if you notice. Kind of in line with that GFS, so that's a little bit of a change. That now the Euro and GFS American are agreeing. So we'll see if that's a trend, but still well within that cone, okay? And if you look at the bulk of the guidance right now, I'll see some of this intensity guidance has really climbed up there to Cat 3 now. That trend has definitely been upward over the last few runs. As again, we looked at the hurricane models too. And then this is the latest, so 18Z. So you see this cone sort of starting to maybe shift a little bit left, whereas it was a little bit further right before. So there's the hurricane models and the global models. Let's go ahead and get the super FSU and the FSU Super Ensemble up. Multi-mode. I'm gonna pull that link up. I don't have it up right now. I'll look at a comment here in a minute. Let me get this pulled up for you. Alright, so here we go. The Super Ensemble. This is an ensemble viewer. Takes most of the ensembles from the ECMWF. That's the Euro, GFS American, UK Met. That's the UK model. You notice that line kind of over here. At this point, let's see. Are these? That's 12Z. This might need to change here. Yeah, we don't have the 18Zs up yet. So my feeling is if these are shifting, that this line might go a little bit further west now. So, again, closer to Tallahassee, potentially. So, still updating that track. I mean, again, best not to pay attention to the exact center of that track is what the National Hurricane Center always says, right? Don't pay attention to this line. Anywhere in this cone, you could potentially have a hurricane directly overhead. And that's the bottom line, Okay. I don't know. Anything else, guys? What else? FSU Super Ensemble. Yeah, the Supermodel. So Lewis is a Knowles fan. Let's see. Yeah, FSU has a great meteorology program. I mean, great tropical meteorology program. A lot of great meteorologists come out of there. In fact, the creator of the Tropical Tidbits page, who I highly recommend if you really want to learn about tropical meteorology, if you want to know what a meteorologist is like, go check him out. Check out his YouTube videos. You may have to sort of, study it a little bit and Google some concepts if you're not familiar with some of them. But he will teach you quite a bit, and he's an FSU grad. So obviously a lot of pages out there use his resources. All right. Thanks for the thanks. Everybody's thanking me. Hey, look, I love to do this stuff, I could talk about it for a while. So, okay, let's talk about going forward, all right? Headlines. We don't have a hurricane yet, okay? Let's, in fact, just refresh just in case, yeah. Don't have a hurricane yet. Showed you why in the models. Probably tomorrow you're going to start to see that eye wall. And then you'll get a hurricane announcement. Then the media will be all over this thing. There'll be a lot more light on it than even now. And then, of course, as it goes over, we didn't even talk about that real quick. We've mentioned it before here, and if you're new, you may not, or you're new to these pages. I'm sure other pages are definitely mentioning it as well. Where is that? Where is it? There you are. This storm is going to move right over top of an area of extremely high oceanic heat content. So if you're not familiar, I think most of you are now, I'm sure, because you follow Mike or all the Mike's weather page, other pages. You may be familiar, or this page. But in any case, you see this tongue of very high oceanic heat content. It's also called the loop current in the Gulf, right? Right now the storm's over this, so it's definitely got ample energy, warm, moist air at the surface of the ocean, and especially a very warm column of water in the top 100 meters or 300 feet of the surface of the ocean that's uniformly warm down to that level. It's been baking in the sun all summer, and finally it started to heat it up enough to where a system like this can utilize it and take advantage of it. But that storm, Idalia is forecasted to go right over top of that. And that's why the National Hurricane Center is predicting rapid intensification. That's a 40 knot increase in winds in 24 hours. And I showed you that drop, 40 millibars or something crazy like that in 24 hours. So that is why it's forecasting that very high oceanic heat content for this storm to utilize with really no wind shear to deal with. Didn't have, we thought maybe some dry air might come into play and affect the storm. Well, it has been affecting it for the last couple of days, but you see that warm air, or that dry air has been pulled down into the storm, and that's why you see most of the moisture kind of on that eastern side, right? Not allowing that dry air, that little bit of wind shear, not allowing the storm to wrap around and form that eye wall I've been discussing. So right now that's the case. That dry air has been coming down and entraining or getting wrapped into the core of this storm and continuing to keep it strengthening down. But now as we go forward, oh, it's 12. Yeah, we don't have 12, 18. Now you see that it starts to shrug it off. Now you see that moisture's wrapping around and consolidating around the core of the storm, right? That dry air has been kind of shrugged off, stays off to the west. And then as you go forward, there's nothing really to deal with here. It's all moisture in here. The dry air's to the west. You don't really have much wind shear to deal with. See all the wind shears over here? Away from the core of the storm. Here's the storm. There's the wind shear. Not really affecting the storm very much. So allowing the storm to do whatever it wants and utilize that high oceanic heat content there in the Gulf of Mexico, which classically, think of Katrina, Rita, all these different very powerful hurricanes. As soon as they hit that loop current, as soon as they hit that high oceanic heat content source area, whatever, boom, like throwing a match on gasoline, just rapid intensification. 40 knots of wind speed increase or greater, or whatever that is, 50 miles per hour, whatever it is, 50 something miles per hour in 24 hours. So that right now is the forecast from the experts, the National Hurricane Center, and that's why, right here. So we go way in depth here, People over the years have said, why don't you get a green screen? Why don't you, have a, I don't know. I don't know what they want. An office or so. I don't know. I do this in my office. This is in my house. I do blur out the background. That's kind of new, I know, for you. But, hey, you don't need to see the background here. You don't care about that anyway. What you care about is the weather. And the beard, right? Okay. I think I'm now rambling, as they say. And, all right, so going forward, we already talked about everything, the question marks. How strong the storm will be will determine the impacts. Obviously, with the track ends up being, it looks like it's creeping west a little bit. So that's of note. That's a headline. Potentially, you could see that forecast track shift west at the next advisory, which will be at 11 Eastern. So I'm out here in Utah. You can even still see the sun coming in. I'm sure it's dark. Well, yeah, it is dark over the East Coast. In any case, we'll get that next update tomorrow. Okay, as this storm approaches West Central Florida, Tampa, the coast of Florida, I'm sure I'll be doing a live, or I will be doing a live, but I may do it for a little bit even longer than I'm doing tonight. Give you all the latest, maybe getting all that news to share with you about. Jillian says I look like Cheech. Looks hazy. I work for an airline. We can't do that. Any case, Levi says beard gang. I love that, beard gang. Bearded Dragons. Go over and join it if you haven't already. But on Wednesday morning, I'll be up, I'm sure, bright and early to do a continuous live stream as this storm makes landfall somewhere in northwest Florida, probably, right, at this point, somewhere within that cone, but we don't know exactly where, of course. But probably Wednesday morning is the likely time frame, maybe late Wednesday morning there on the East Coast. But I'll be probably up there brighter and early. I got the day off already, ready to bring you the latest on Idalia and those impacts. All right, we'll get that news out to the people who need it. Once again, if you haven't already, go ahead and like the video. Go ahead and share with friends. Go ahead and leave a comment. If you're on YouTube watching, go ahead and like and subscribe. Share with friends. If you're on Facebook and you want to move over to YouTube, watch this on your smart TV where you can kick back, relax, have a little mineral water while you watch the Bearded Weatherman. Please do so. All right. I think that's it, guys. I think we've covered it. There's always more to talk about, but what else is there to say? Potential major Category 3 or 4 hurricane Who knows? Category 5. I don't think it's going to have time for that, though. You know, I don't. The problem with that is, well, first off, the problem is that it would be a Category 5 hurricane, of course. But the second problem is that it just doesn't have that much time over this high oceanic heat content, this loop current. You know, once it passes it, yeah, that's some very hot in water, you know, very warm water there. But it only really has, you know, maybe 24 hours to utilize this area here to really rapidly intensify. So it just may not have enough time over that heat, that source of very warm water. And we're talking 89 degrees Fahrenheit in some areas. It's crazy. Bath water out there in the Gulf. So I don't know about Category 5, but look, Category 4 is definitely possible as it approaches land. Certainly right now the forecast calls for a strong Category 3, so it wouldn't take much to get to that Category 4 level. And again, the higher the category, the more devastation, right? It's just incomprehensibly different, the damage from a Category 1 to a Category 4 hurricane. It's just like, you should say it shouldn't be Category 4, it should be Category 100. And then a Category 5 should be Category, 400 or something, That would be better. That would be more of a better, that would be a better comparison. That would be to scale, right? All right. I think I'm just talking to hear the sound of my voice at this point. So that's going to do it tonight. Good to see everybody. Bearded Weatherman signing off. I will be back on tomorrow. We will get more updates. We will be watching for that 11 p.m. advisory. I might check in real quick, do a late night, do a TBW after dark. We'll see. I might be sleeping. If not, I will check in, see if we've got that hurricane, that upgrade to hurricane. At that point, I'm doubtful, but it's always possible. I think that the hurricane's going to come tomorrow. So